The Galactic Council had existed for over 60,000 years. Comprised of more than 200 advanced civilizations, it governed vast sectors of the Orion Arm through a mixture of tradition, bureaucracy, and overwhelming force. Its directives were not debated. They were implemented. Every space-faring species eventually received the summons. All had complied. When humanity breached the limits of its solar system and achieved faster-than-light travel, Council probes recorded the event and quietly activated their long-dormant observation protocols. What they saw was a planet that defied expectation. Divided politically, chaotic economically, and volatile militarily, yet still advancing at a pace rarely seen. In just 2 centuries, humans had gone from internal combustion to orbital infrastructure. Primitive in behavior but ambitious in scope. A curiosity, but nothing more. Another young race on the path to assimilation. The protocols were initiated. Formal contact established. Emissaries were dispatched from Council-controlled space. They arrived not with threats but declarations. Their message had been spoken 100 times before, unchanged for millennia. The Council recognized Earth's development. According to the Ascension Doctrine, humanity was now subject to the responsibilities of galactic integration. A tribute of 20% of Earth's raw materials and manufactured goods would be delivered annually. Control of orbital facilities would transition to Council authorities for standardization. Human military personnel would be conscripted for service in the unified peace forces. In return, Earth would be granted access to interstellar trade routes, shared technology, and a seat at the advisory table. There was no pretense of equality. This was protocol. The same message had been delivered to countless civilizations before. Compliance had always followed. The transmission was left embedded in a relay beacon in geosynchronous orbit above Earth. The Council emissaries withdrew, expecting the usual pattern: brief protests, scattered public resistance, eventual capitulation. Instead, they received nothing. No acknowledgement. No counteroffer. No appeal. Within 3 days, the relay beacon went offline. Not destroyed, simply disconnected. The subspace frequencies it relied upon were suddenly empty. Observation probes within the Sol system began to lose contact. One by one, they went dark. Some were intercepted. Others vanished entirely. Remaining Council listening posts recorded the collapse of civilian communication across all human channels. Civilian broadcasts ceased. Trade signals went silent. Everything that was once visible became invisible. Council analysts took notice. This was not a sign of panic or fragmentation. It was an organized blackout. A full-spectrum retreat from all external communication. In centuries of managing integration, the Council had never seen this behavior. Requests for updates began to arrive from neighboring species. What was the status of Earth? Had integration begun? Was there resistance? The Council, unsure of what to report, issued vague statements of ongoing proceedings. No alarms were raised. No fleet was dispatched. Then, on the 20th day, a single message arrived. No encryption. No diplomatic codes. It originated from Earth's Deep Space Command Network and was addressed to the Council's Central Administrative Array. The contents of the message were brief. From the United Terran Assembly. To the Galactic Council High Consulate. Subject: tribute demand. Response: denied. There was no elaboration, no offer of negotiation, no signal of uncertainty. The message was replicated across all major Council relay points, transmitted in every known language in the archive. It repeated on a loop for exactly 60 seconds, then ceased. The originating signal terminated without trace. Council reaction was fragmented. Some dismissed the act as symbolic posturing. Others began to reassess their data. The message did not read as political theater or desperate defiance. It was structured, precise, and absolute. The implications were difficult to ignore. Humanity had not offered protest. It had not declared war. It had not appealed for understanding. It had simply refused. No species had ever done so in this way. Not with such clarity. Not without hesitation. And somewhere, in the core of Council space, a new assessment was initiated. Risk factor: undetermined. Humans did not evolve in harmony. Their history was not one of gentle ascension, but of relentless struggle. Survival on Earth demanded competition, innovation, and endurance. Unlike most sentient species in the galactic community, which developed in stable climates and cooperative societies, humanity thrived in a volatile environment. From their earliest days, conflict defined their path. Predators, natural disasters, scarcity of resources, each challenge shaped a species that learned not only to adapt, but to overcome through force, ingenuity, and sheer will. Civilization emerged through fire and blood. Kingdoms rose by conquest, empires fell by rebellion. No political system remained unchallenged. Every ideology was tested in war. Humanity built its progress on defiance. Tyrants were overthrown. Occupiers were driven out. Slavery was abolished. Oppression was met with revolution. The historical record is a litany of resistance, against monarchs, against colonizers, against dictators. No power was ever accepted without question. No submission ever went unchallenged for long. This wasn't chaos. It was refinement. From this crucible emerged a mindset unlike any the Council had catalogued. Humans viewed struggle not as something to be avoided, but as a necessary condition for growth. Suffering, in their collective psyche, carried purpose. Loss demanded response. Adversity demanded transformation. They forged meaning from pain. Where other species sought safety, humans pursued excellence, regardless of cost. Technology followed the same arc. Their advancements were not gifts from enlightened councils or centuries of peace. Their breakthroughs were born in urgency, necessity, and often desperation. From the first combustion engine to orbital satellites, every leap forward was driven by competition, military, economic, or ideological. They reached space not to explore peacefully, but to gain advantage. The moon landing was not for unity, it was to win. And they did. Again and again. Their capacity for violence was matched only by their creativity. When conventional warfare failed, they developed asymmetric tactics. When resources dwindled, they engineered synthetic alternatives. When surrounded, they improvised. No standard solution lasted long. They broke rules, rewrote them, and then shattered them again. They prized effectiveness above tradition, results above protocol. To most civilizations, this was chaos. To humans, it was evolution. But even more dangerous than their methods was their mentality. Humans do not believe in inevitability. Defeat, extinction, conquest, these are conditions, not conclusions. Their cultural fabric is filled with stories of resistance in the face of overwhelming odds. They do not yield because they see value in standing, even when standing leads to ruin. It is not strategy, it is identity. This mindset permeated every level of their civilization. From military doctrine to diplomatic policy, from education to media, the message was consistent: never submit without a fight. And often, fight even when there is no hope of winning. To them, dignity mattered more than survival. And that made them unpredictable. The Council had studied hundreds of species. Some had rebelled. Some had resisted for decades. But in each case, logic prevailed. The cost of defiance outweighed its reward. Eventually, they joined. Integration followed. Peace returned. Humanity would not follow that model. Their decision to reject tribute was not an act of madness. It was entirely consistent with their past. No Earth-born civilization had ever endured under foreign dominance without rising up. From tribal revolts to global wars, the pattern was unbroken. It was not arrogance. It was certainty. The moment the demand was made, the outcome had already been chosen. They had no interest in galactic peace secured through submission. No fascination with council prestige. No awe at technological superiority. What the council offered was structure. What humanity valued was autonomy. And for that, they were willing to risk annihilation. Even more unsettling was their ability to unify when threatened. Internally fractured, yes, divided by language, culture, ideology, But when challenged from the outside, they coalesced. Not perfectly. Not peacefully. But with direction and purpose. Time and again, external pressure transformed disarray into singular focus. The greater the threat, the sharper their response. This refusal was not impulsive. It was deliberate. They had calculated what defiance would cost. They had accepted it before the Council even realized it had been rejected. They had nothing to prove. Only something to protect. And they would defend it, not with negotiation, not with appeal, but with everything they had. Earth's decision had already been made, but the silence that followed was not an action. While the Council waited for diplomacy, humanity prepared for confrontation. There were no public broadcasts, no political statements, no open declarations. Instead, directives moved through encrypted channels, black sites were reactivated, and dormant defense protocols were brought online. Across every major continent, production shifted quietly but completely. Civilian industries were retooled. Supply chains were redirected. Every non-essential project was suspended. Within weeks, Earth's orbit began to change. Previously commercial shipyards expanded operations without notice. Facilities once intended for cargo haulers now produced armored hulls. Modular designs allowed for rapid construction, adaptable to changing conditions. On the surface, factories that once produced automotive components were manufacturing engine cores, plating, and targeting systems. Military contracts were no longer tendered, they were assigned. Every industrialized nation complied, regardless of history or politics. Private aerospace firms merged into a single command structure, coordinated through a unified defense network. Humanity had never been fully united. But this was not about ideology, it was survival. Disagreements persisted, but they did not interfere. Earth was acting as one species, not as a collection of governments. The mechanism for this unity was not trust, it was necessity. No global summit was needed. No treaty signed. The nature of the threat had done what diplomacy never could. Artificial intelligence systems originally developed for civilian infrastructure were repurposed for tactical logistics and real-time analysis. Swarm learning models were deployed to optimize every stage of the war build-up. Weapon designs were tested in virtual environments at speeds far beyond human capability. Materials science divisions fast-tracked breakthroughs in alloy composition, radiation shielding, and hull reinforcement. Anything inefficient was discarded. There was no time for ceremony. Only function mattered. The first wave of new warships rolled out in silence. Lacking aesthetic refinement, they resembled nothing in the Council's database. Blocky, overarmored, layered in redundant systems. They weren't beautiful. They weren't supposed to be. Each one was designed to take catastrophic damage and remain operational. Shielding was limited. Power was routed into kinetic weaponry and self-contained fusion arrays. These vessels didn't rely on energy superiority. They relied on endurance, adaptability, and overwhelming impact. Orbital platforms, previously decommissioned or under civilian jurisdiction, were brought back online and heavily fortified. Earth's moon became a logistics and sensor hub, its surface layered with communication arrays, refueling depots, and long-range artillery. Mars was converted into a forward manufacturing base. Transport vessels, disguised as mining freighters, were rearmed and armored. Civilian deep space tugs were converted into support ships, fitted with point defense systems and combat drones. Earth's asteroid belt became a resource highway. Mining platforms operated continuously, feeding raw material into autonomous forges. Everything was used. Nothing was wasted. Terran design principles favored ruggedness over elegance. Human ships had no reliance on external maintenance. Each vessel carried its own fabrication systems, damage control AI, and manual override redundancies. Loss of command did not equal loss of function. Even more critical than the hardware was the strategy. Human command structures were decentralized by design. No single point of failure existed. Military coordination was distributed across ground, orbital, and deep space networks. Contingency plans were layered in depth, with real-time adaptability built into operational doctrine. The objective was not just to fight, it was to survive first contact, analyze the response, and evolve. The Council's estimates had been based on visible infrastructure. They had not accounted for latent capacity. Human technology was not stored, it was waiting. Military doctrine was not hidden, it had been evolving in real time through proxy conflicts, simulations, and private sector R/&D. Earth was not preparing from scratch. It was activating something already designed, just never used. No fanfare marked the completion of the first fully operational fleet. No insignias adorned the hulls. The ships bore serial numbers, registry codes, and function markers. Their crews trained under blackout conditions. Civilian traffic was rerouted to prevent detection. Communications were encrypted at a level beyond known Council capabilities. From the outside, Earth was quiet. Inside, it was transforming into a war machine. Not built for conquest. Not designed for posturing. Built for reply. The Council's enforcement fleet arrived on the edge of the Sol system with standard formation protocols. It was not a punitive force, merely a demonstration of strength, designed to compel compliance through presence, not engagement. Composed of 60 capital ships and hundreds of support craft, its purpose was deterrence. No civilization had ever resisted past this stage. The outcome, historically, was submission followed by structured integration. Initial scans of the system returned unexpected results. Orbital density was higher than projected. Communications were absent. Power signatures were heavily masked. Passive sensors failed to detect civilian traffic. Probes sent ahead were intercepted within hours. Their data streams were cut mid-transmission. What returned was fragmented telemetry and static. This was not the usual pattern of resistance. It was deliberate information control. The fleet moved forward cautiously. Standard doctrine called for system-wide broadcasting, repeating the offer of peaceful integration, citing Council benefits, reiterating consequences. The broadcast was issued. No reply came. Secondary protocols were activated. Surveillance platforms deployed. Still, nothing responded. Not even civilian infrastructure acknowledged their presence. It was as though the entire system had gone dark by design. 4 days in, an unarmed probe from the human side crossed into Council-controlled space. It broadcast a single message in tight beam format. All Council ships within Sol jurisdiction were now considered active hostiles. Retreat was advised. Targeting systems on the probe activated briefly to lock onto 6 ships simultaneously, then shut down. The probe self-terminated. A warning, not a strike. Council command dismissed the signal as posturing. Orders were given to move inward. Warships accelerated toward Mars, expecting token resistance at most. Instead, they encountered a wall of silence, followed by sudden, coordinated interference across all bands. Navigation systems began receiving false telemetry. Communications dropped into layered encryption loops. Fleet cohesion wavered. Then the first human fleet revealed itself. No grand entrance. No declarations. They appeared from behind orbital shadows and deep space obstructions, their signatures masked beneath asteroid traffic and artificial noise. Configured for impact over elegance, the ships opened fire with no prelude. Kinetic slugs, rail accelerators, and wide-field pulse weapons tore through the Council's vanguard in seconds. Shields designed for energy dispersal failed against physical projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. Hulls ruptured. Fire control systems faltered under targeted EMP bursts. Council ships responded with doctrine, regroup, analyze, counter. But the enemy did not give them time. Human vessels moved with irregular patterns, nonlinear, unpredictable. Command AI attempted to map trajectories and failed. Tactical formations fell apart. Every response was met with a faster adaptation. When a group attempted to flank, human ships self-divided into hunter-killer pairs, isolating and disabling them with precise, coordinated strikes. Within hours, 16 Council vessels had been rendered inoperable. Not destroyed, disabled. Deliberately. Life support remained functional. Engines were dead. Weapons were offline. Crews were alive but powerless. No boarding attempts followed. Humanity had made its point. The remaining fleet fell back to reorient, expecting pursuit. It never came. Human ships withdrew to high-angle orbits and silent vectors, vanishing into electromagnetic clutter. The message was clear. Earth would not be occupied. It would not negotiate under pressure. It had not launched an invasion, nor claimed territory. It had simply repelled what was considered by all precedent to be an unstoppable force. Council Command hesitated. This was not the result they had prepared for. No predictive model accounted for the rapid technological adaptation, the precision of tactics, the intensity of coordination. Humanity had not only resisted, they had predicted Council behavior and designed countermeasures in advance. Emergency sub-council meetings were convened. Proposals ranged from escalation to total embargo. But even the most aggressive voices paused. Every response carried risk. A larger fleet could be sent, but now there was doubt. Not in the Council's power, but in the certainty of victory. Humanity had introduced uncertainty. That, more than the losses, shook the Council. No declaration of war had been issued by either side. No diplomatic ties remained. The Council did not retreat, but they no longer advanced. They held position, assessing, repeating calculations that now refused to stabilize. They had come expecting submission. What they encountered was a warning. Not just of strength, but of intent. Earth had changed the conversation. Time passed, but Earth remained silent. No gloating, no message of triumph, no counter-demand. Humanity had proven its capability but offered no further engagement. The Council, used to dominance followed by compliance, now faced an unprecedented impasse. Their fleet lingered in the outer system, cautious but unwilling to provoke a second confrontation. Reinforcements were requested, but no one wanted to commit more forces without clarity. What had begun as routine enforcement now felt like a potential quagmire. Humanity did not chase its advantage. There was no expansion beyond the solar boundary. No effort to disrupt Council territories. Earth's defenses remained active, but entirely within their own system. It was not aggression. It was containment. That choice disturbed the Council more than open hostility. Humans weren't looking to conquer, they were drawing a line. Council analysts sifted through fragments of the battle, attempting to reconstruct the failure. The tactics, the efficiency, the precision, all pointed to a civilization that had prepared for this possibility far in advance. Not just in weapons, but in mindset. Earth hadn't resisted instinctively, it had anticipated the encounter. Generations of strategic culture, warfare modeling, and decentralized innovation had produced a response more cohesive than any alliance the Council had ever faced. In hushed reports circulated among senior strategists, a new phrase appeared: deterrence through resilience. It wasn't about superior firepower. It was about the human capacity to endure, adapt, and strike only when necessary. Every move made by Earth was calibrated, not reactive, but deliberate. There was no waste, no excess, no reliance on spectacle. The objective was clear: make further engagement too costly to justify. Other species within the Council began to ask questions. Quietly at first, then openly. If Earth could reject tribute and remain intact, what did that say about the Council's authority? Was submission truly inevitable? Could independence be defended if the will existed? These weren't revolutionary declarations yet, but the thoughts were spreading. One refusal had cracked the illusion of total control. The Council attempted to reassert narrative dominance through internal channels. Human resistance was framed as an anomaly, an outlier. A temporary divergence soon to be corrected. But the data didn't align. The Council's own simulations failed to produce victory without extreme escalation. And escalation carried risk, not just in resources, but in perception. If Earth repelled a second wave, the myth of Council supremacy would fracture. Earth understood this dynamic. It offered no pretext for peace, nor justification for war. Its silence forced the Council to speak first. But every possible message carried consequences. A threat would expose weakness if ignored. A concession would signal defeat. The only viable path left was inaction. As weeks turned to months, the standoff normalized. Council fleets held orbit at a respectful distance. Earth continued reinforcing its system. Patrol patterns were randomized. Communications remained dark. It wasn't a truce. It was a recognition. Mutual understanding forged without diplomacy. In classified briefings, Council leaders acknowledged the truth privately but never publicly. Earth was not to be provoked. They weren't dominant, but they were immune to pressure. And in a galaxy ruled by precedent, that made them dangerous. For humanity, victory wasn't in conquest. It was in preservation. By refusing tribute, they preserved their sovereignty. By resisting aggression, they preserved their dignity. They didn't need to win battles across the stars. They needed only to show they wouldn't lose their own. Their message, never officially stated but universally understood, was simple: Earth bows to no throne built on expectation. The Council moved on, slower and more cautious in its dealings with developing species. Tribute demands were delayed, phrasing softened, contingencies expanded. Humanity remained a shadow in those conversations. A silent example of refusal turned into policy. And across Earth, life resumed. Quietly, deliberately, and with the weight of knowledge that they had faced the oldest power in the galaxy, and not only survived, but redefined the rules. Without celebration, without declaration, they had altered the course of history. Not through diplomacy. Not through ideology. Through the unspoken truth that some species do not ask permission to be free.